On this edition of ITG, the Mountaineers fall at home to Baylor in their penultimate home game. What went wrong against the Bears? How can the Mountaineers salvage something these last two games? We'll get into all of that and more on this edition of In the Gun.
You are now watching Believe.
ITG.
With Wes, Owen, and Jed.
I've got the best teammates in the business here, all right?
No way!
They both played the game. They both know the game. Owen is the runaway beer truck known for having some fun.
Owen Schmidt, you have a podcast, In the Gun.
Owen Schmidt, like a runaway beer truck down the sidelines.
Jed is the signal caller who is the X's and O's and the brainiac.
First of all, Jed's research is pretty impressive.
So we've combined those two skill sets.
Skills I've acquired over a very long career.
You are In the Gun.
Once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 212 of your new favorite WVU football podcast. I'm Wes Euler. As always, best teammates in the business. We got the signal caller, Jed Drenning. And as always, we are brought to you in part by our friends at Bet Online. The game starts here. This is the Baylor recap episode. We will get into that 49-35 loss at home Saturday afternoon to the Baylor Bears. First time Baylor has been victorious in the Big 12. But first, Jed, a couple around campus noteworthy things going on here to kick us off on this episode. First of all, how about a big shout out to the men's soccer team? We told you last week how they had won the Sun Belt regular season championship. Well, on Sunday, they won the Sun Belt Conference tournament as well, too, beating Marshall in a penalty shootout at home. You want to talk about drama. I think 6 or 7 rounds deep in the penalty shootout before the WVU goalie. WVU scored, and then the WVU goalie made the save. That was the difference. So Jed, as they call that in the soccer business, they did the double, right? They won the regular season championship and then the tournament. So a big congratulations to Dan Stratz and everyone involved. I mean, this is a team that was, in the Final Four last year. We know another chance to have a great run this year. They did get a little slighted by the committee, Jed. They didn't get one of the seeds in the tournament, which means essentially they're not going to get a first-round bye. They'll have to play an extra game in the tournament, which is surprising when you won the Sun Belt regular season and the Sun Belt tournament, and you've been ranked first in the country at different points this year. You were in the top 10 pretty much the entire year, but I guess that'll just make it all that much sweeter when they go on another run here over the next couple weeks, right?
I was going to ask you, is that a screw job? Because it sure seemed like one from the outside looking in. Look, nobody knows less about soccer than me, but I deferred to my soccer expert, the same guy that actually helps us populate the viewer and listener picks each week, Will Gregory. Will Gregory's a big soccer guy. Matter of fact, his son Ethan plays up at Messiah, and they were just in the big tournament.
That's a good soccer school, yeah.
It's good soccer. And so Will and his wife Crystal got to travel up and watch their boy play. They won the first round, lost the second round. But it was 2 great games, he said. And I was asking about this seeding for West Virginia. And I said, look, am I wrong in saying this is kind of a screw job a little bit? And he said, no. He said a lot of people would think that because they won their conference. They won the Sun Belt based on where they finished. They were ranked. I can't remember what he told me. But yeah, you wouldn't think that's a play-in position. But who am I to say? I don't know. But it sure wouldn't seem like one, right? To have to play the extra game and then face Virginia, the winner of the West Virginia game does. But either way, hats off. All you ask for at the end of the day is an opportunity, and they have an opportunity to play their way in and make some damage. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah, it does seem like a little bit of a farce, a little bit of a screw job. But you know what, Jed? That'll just make it more fun, when, like I said, when they do go on a run here. I don't get it, especially when you see Marshall's one of those teams that got was a seeded team, as they call it, getting that first round bye when you beat Marshall in the regular. Well, you were regular in the same conference as Marshall. Your regular season champions, your tournament champions. They end up being the one from the Sun Belt that gets the seed. But hey, it's nothing we haven't experienced as Mountaineers before, right? Bob Huggins and the boys were criminally underseeded every year. Feels like Nikki Izzo Brown and the girls are underseeded very often. We know that
last year kind of had that vibe. You know what I mean?
Same thing. Yep. But you
The
know
way
what?
they played down there in North Carolina, yeah.
I think even last year people thought our men's soccer team was a little underappreciated, and they went to the College Cup. They went all the way to the Final Four. So let's do it again. Let's go on another run here. Let's hey, and you know what? As you and I have talked about before, those little motivational things that you can kind of use to put in the head of 19, 20, 21-year-olds. Maybe for Dan Stratz and company, they don't hate it because they said, you know what? All of a sudden we've got these guys refocused and pissed off, and hey, that can always be a good thing too.
Kirby Smart's trying to convince his Georgia team 2 years ago before they smacked TCU 65-7.
Everyone was picking us to go 7-5.
Yeah, all this disrespect, picking us to go 7-5.
One random Florida fan on Twitter who said you were going to go 7-5. What are you talking about?
I mean, look at the jet fuel that being picked 14th provided for the football team last year. Look at Arizona State picked 16th, dead last this year. Yep. So, and I've said this many times, and I'll say it again. I don't know that West Virginia in any sports competition has ever done anything great that it should have done. Right? All the great moments are things we shouldn't have been able to do. And that's what makes him great. And that's what makes him historic, and that's what makes him memorable. And this could be another one of those stories. Hey, you shouldn't be able to play the extra play-in game. Hey, you shouldn't be able to have to go on the road. So if you think back, pick your sport, whatever your favorite might be, but whatever the most memorable moments are, odds are the things you remember most are things we really shouldn't have been able to do, but yet found a way to do it. So here we are.
Hey, let's go do it again. Let's go win a natty as a play-in team. That would be pretty stinking special, I think, for sure. A big thank you to our friends at Toothman Ford, our guy JR, for being a presenting sponsor of In the Gun as well. Shout out everybody there at Team Toothman. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. Jed, David Long might need a ride to Detroit. Former Mountaineers standout linebacker, formerly with the Dolphins, now has been signed by the Lions. And I tell you what, it's been a bit of a tumultuous year for him, right? I mean, came into the year captain of the Miami Dolphins defense. They're not having the season that they wanted. He not having the season that he wanted. Spent some time injured. The Dolphins ended up waiving him due to that injury. He has now been picked up by the Lions again. And I gotta tell you, Jed. I mean, right now, if you want to land anywhere in the NFL, hey, certainly Buffalo and Kansas City are in the conversation, but I think that short list probably ends with Detroit as well, too, the three teams that really feel like that upper crust. And there's some other good teams. Steelers are 8-2. Ravens are still a really good team. But those kind of three teams feel like the upper crust of the NFL. Detroit, of course, in the NFC. I mean, Jed, listen, I know the Jacksonville Jaguars aren't good, but they're beating NFL teams 52-9. Like, this isn't Alabama against South Central Missouri, Tennessee State Community College. Like, this is an NFL team against an NFL team, and they're lining up 52-9 and just crushing teams. Certainly a exciting spot for David Long Jr. to land, and we could see him playing some very meaningful postseason snaps.
What's more impressive, Wes? I'm looking at Jared Goff's numbers in this 52-9 win, 400 and some yards, 4 touchdowns. I don't know if it's more impressive to beat an NFL team 52-9 or do what they did the week before and have Jared Goff throw 5 picks and win an NFL game. They are crazy. So stacked. Crazy. Dan Campbell has completely changed the culture. Think of what you just said. Well, I'll tell you what, if you're going anywhere in the NFL, that's one of the 2 or 3 landing spots you want to get. You haven't said that about the Detroit Lions in half a century or more, 60 years, 70. I'd have to go back and really dig, but David Long is going to land in a really good spot, and that's all they need is another player capable of the types of things that David Long at his best are capable of, because that is a team that is steamrolling people. So he's going to step into a great culture, a great situation. It's hard not to love Dan Campbell. It's just hard. He's real. He's off the cuff. He's legit. It didn't seem like it when he was first hired. You're like, this guy, he sounds like a pro wrestler. He can't be real. Well, guess what? He is. He is absolutely real. It's showing on the field, and I'm happy for David. Great landing spot for David. So, yeah, it's one of the premier teams in all of football right now. And I'd say if you looked at the Vegas odds, they're probably the front runner as to win the Super Bowl. I'd say if you had to pick one team right now, I'd say the Lions are. But happy for David. and all these little wrinkles I think of, like, is David Montgomery still with the Bears? No, he's now with the Lions.
No, he's with the Lions. Yeah, yeah.
He's with the Lions. Okay. I knew there was a connection there that I was thinking of earlier today when I saw this. David Montgomery, who was with the Bears. Here's why I say that, because remember the battles that David Long had with David Montgomery when he was at West Virginia and David Montgomery was at Iowa State. That goes back to high school. They played against each other in high school in Ohio.
That's right.
So that's kind of cool to see him land on that roster with that guy that he has so much history with. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other guys populating that Lions roster that David has some kind of history with. But again, that guy has such a knack for making plays. Once he gets healthy, once he gets up to speed, once he learns the playbook, he'll start making some plays for the Lions as well, no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, obviously I'm a little biased, but I think he's one of the more underrated linebackers in football. I mean, he got a nice contract from the Dolphins. It's hard to say you're still one of the more underrated players when you do get a nice contract like he got a couple years ago from Miami, but such an effective middle linebacker in the NFL, what you need in the modern game, can play sideline to sideline, can tackle, can run with guys in coverage. Let's hope he's 100% healthy and at his best again, because if he is, he's going to play some very meaningful football down the stretch for a team that's, I think, very easy to root for. And you throw a Mountaineer on the squad as well, too. Now, even more reason for us to root for the Lions and Dan Campbell and everything that they have going on there. And then Jed, kind of finally here in our around campus headlines. Another great week for Zach Frazier, highest rated rookie offensive lineman in Pro Football Focus, a perfect 100% grade in pass reps. And we've laughed, everyone's seen them, the Baldy breakdowns, right? Of course, Brian Baldinger, who's a former NFL offensive lineman and radio analyst and covers the NFL, as well as anybody. He was calling the game for the national radio broadcast Sunday, Jed, Steelers-Ravens. I don't know if it was Westwood One or whatever, but he was calling the game for the whatever the national radio
SXM,
broadcast.
whatever, yeah.
Well, right. And their booth is right next to ours. So I saw him in there, and I was like, I talked to him briefly during Steelers training camp back in July. Told him that I loved his videos. We talked about Zach Frazier, told him that I'm a WVU fan. You're going to love this guy, Zach. And he was, saying, I already love this guy, Zach, and all that stuff. So I had to go in and say hello to him again. Hey, I'm Wes Euler. I met you. I talked to you for 5 minutes at Steelers training camp on the sideline that one day. I'm the WVU guy who was talking your ear off about Zach. And he goes, oh, Matt Frazier. He just takes him to the mat, WWE style, baby. And he put out another great video today, Baldy did, where he said Zach Frazier is like watching Monday Night Raw, watching this guy play football. So yeah, after missing a couple games because of that injury, Zach Frazier back at the forefront of getting all the love and accolades. Jed, Pro Football Focus, ESPN, both have him as the highest ranked rookie that is not a quarterback or a wide receiver, basically, if that makes sense. And just incredible accolades continuing to pour in for our guy.
I saw Baldy's tweet. Love the nickname. He puts it in quotes, so it's a nickname, Matt Frazier. But I think he has to drop one of the T's, doesn't he? He has to go to M-A-T Frazier if that's the Matt, right?
That's right.
But when you look at what Zach Frazier's doing and the damage, he's just wreaking havoc right at the point of attack. And those who don't watch the Steelers, you got another guard right next to him who's also a rookie, in Mason McCormick, this massive human being. I could see those dudes just playing side by side for a decade. And just, you're going to need some body bags if you face them, because Zach is playing at a high level. Mason McCormick's playing at a high level. I remember talking to Ray, Zach's dad, even during camp. I guess that's kind of who he was hanging out with to some extent, was Mason McCormick. You probably saw it up there. And but Zach is doing everything that we thought Zach Frazier presented the opportunity would do. And it's just going to continue to get better and get better. And you see them leaning on him in times of crisis. There's crucial times in the game where they're hitting A-gap, and they're hitting A-gap for a reason. They just have incredible faith in Zach Frazier, and he's only halfway through his rookie season. I can't imagine what this is going to look like 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now as he becomes more and more battle-tested. But the only dream that I have in the NFL this year, I want Zach Frazier. I'm not delusional. I want Zach Frazier to at least place in the Rookie of the Year race. I want him to be mentioned and place I don't
Well,
care
I
if
can
he
tell you,
finishes fourth.
one and two, and one and two in some order is going to be Jaden Daniels and Brock Bowers, the of course quarterback of the Commanders and the tight end for the Raiders. I forgot to mention him, or I said wide receivers. Is Malik Neighbors is one of the guys who's sub, but what Brock Bowers is doing as a rookie tight end with Aiden O'Connell as his quarterback is just ridiculous.
He did it again over the weekend.
It's going to be Jaden Daniels and Brock Bowers 1 and 2 in some order, but I legitimately think Zach can be right, in that at the forefront of that next.
I do think George is missing Brock Bowers a little bit. I really do. You don't replace Brock Bowers. Even Georgia.
He's
okay,
outstanding.
But if he can climb up to top 5 just to get mentioned and just to be listed, that's all I'm asking. Look, I get it. He's an O lineman. He's a slobber knocker. That's what he is. You don't get the flash. You don't get the big plays. You don't get the headlines. You don't get the highlights on SportsCenter. But if an O lineman can crack that top 5 and get notoriety and mention, if anybody can do it, Zach can. That's what I'm pulling for. That's my wish list. One thing on that wish list, one item, that's it, this year in the NFL, is to get Zach Frazier as a finalist, a genuine, legitimate finalist for Rookie of the Year.
Yeah. Can't wait.
Why wouldn't he be? Right? Why wouldn't he be?
I mean, I tell you what, it's crazy impressive what he's doing right now. Week in and week out, and nationally and everywhere else. It's not just WVU people like us. It's not just somebody who works for the Steelers or roots for the Steelers or whatever. Long may he reign, Zach Frazier, in the top of the AFC North standings there. And speaking of which, real quick, everybody will get a kick out of this as well, too. Sunday, I'm leaving the game. I'm walking to my car after Steelers-Ravens. Steelers win. Everybody's in a good mood. And I see I'm talking like 5 or 6 people wearing Beanie Bishop Steelers jerseys. And I'm like, okay, like this has to be friends. This has to be family and friends, right? There's not just a group of 5 people walking around in custom jerseys of the undrafted
Beanie's Italian Army,
right? He's like Tommy DeVito, like the Italian backup quarterback for the Giants. Like, so I'm going to my car and I see these 5 people walking that are wearing Beanie Bishop Steeler jerseys, and I'm like, all right, like something's got to be going on here. And so I go, you guys got to know Beanie Bishop. And they're like, yeah. And I said, what's up? I said, my name's Wes. I said, I work for the team. I said, but I went to WVU. So I've been a big Beanie guy, for a couple years now. And they went, you're a Mountaineer? Oh, let's go. And we were high-fiving and everything. And we may or may not have even done a quick, short, brief rendition of Sweet Caroline, the 5 or 6 of us. All right. We may or may not have slapped hands and done a quick little rendition of Sweet Caroline. So all good vibes there around our Mountaineers and the pros as some really exciting things happen. I mean, Rasul Douglas, huge couple plays as the Buffalo Bills take down the Chiefs last night. It's great to see so many of those guys continue to do the dang thing at the next level. We have got to get to a break. When we come back here on the other side, we will recap 49-35. Baylor gets it done for the first time ever in Morgantown. We'll talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, everything when we return. He's Jed Drenning. I'm Wes Euler. You are in the gun.
There are better-known tractors in the world than Coyote. Ones with bigger names, longer histories, more popular hats, cute toy lines. But there's not a single tractor ever been built that's better equipped to do the dirty work. So we'll just focus on what really matters. Coyote, we dig dirt.
Now at Johnston Equipment, get 0% financing for 72 months, plus a free loader on select Coyote models in stock. Visit us on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan.
Back in the gun here as we roll along. The Mountaineers fall to the Baylor Bears 49-35 Saturday afternoon/evening in Morgantown. The first win for the Baylor Bears at Mountaineer Field at Milan Puskar Stadium. Jed, I don't know exactly where you want to start on this one. We could do some good, some bad, some ugly. But a couple of the indicators from this game, if you would have told me beforehand that some of these things were going to happen, I would have said, man, we're going to roll. I mean, 211 rushing yards in the first half. I mean, in 30 minutes of football, you had over 200 rushing yards. You're going to typically win when that happens. The time of possession for a lion's share of the game was crazy slanted towards WVU. I thought Garrett Green played an insanely effective game. And, despite all that, still ends up getting away from you in the second half. So where you want to dive in first here, dear signal caller?
One of these things where the situational football caught up to us, right? That's a good way of putting that. I thought Garrett was terribly productive.
Yeah, I did too. I thought he
and
played
the
well.
X factor that the X factor that I don't know if he played efficient, but he was productive, and he did, as Neil said, he kept us in the game. This was one of those games where our pass pro didn't hold up like it ordinarily might, and his escapability really bailed us out a few times, and he turned some negatives into some positives with his legs. But I mean, I agree with you, Wes. When you look at, had you told me before the game, hey, we're going to run for 2+ bills in the first half. Hey, we're going to have 340 at halftime. Hey, we're going to have 51 snaps offensively to their 30 at halftime.
Garrett Green's going to have 380 yards and 4 touchdowns of offense.
Yes. The thing that I didn't see coming, well, there were a handful of things, but the biggest thing that I didn't see coming, I didn't think that Baylor's O-line, especially their interior O-line, would have as much success against our D tackles as what they did. Against Fatorma Malva, against Hammond Russell. And there's a reason that one of our linebackers ends up with 16 tackles, one of our safety ends up with 15, right? Because that first level, we weren't as dominant as we had been in recent weeks. That's what we talked all week last week, Wes. We were going to see inside zone. That's what Baylor does. And they did. They gave us a steady diet of inside zone. And they blocked it very effectively enough to put those playmakers they have in space. And, from Bryson Washington to Dawson Pendergrass. I mean, Washington is explosive. He has a burst. He's tough to bring down. You saw that a number of times. I was impressed by the role that he played in the pass game. I really was. And how Jake Spavital weaponized him as a target in the pass game with matchups that favored them against our linebackers. So, I mean, you saw this thing out of the gates. It had a weird vibe, like don't blink, don't blink, don't blink, right? It kind of had that feel early on because you recognize both teams. I mean, we took the ball to start the game and drove right down the field and scored. They answered just as quickly with a score of their own. You're like, all right, don't blink. Well, that's the issue. Two situations that I would turn to, Wes. Of course, it was 35-28 at halftime. I mentioned when it was 35-21, we took a timeout with 40 some odd seconds left. I told Tony, I said, look, if I remember right, it's 35-28 in the 70-63 game at halftime. I was wrong. Baylor had 35, but it was 35 all in the 2012 game. I said, I'll take 35-28 right now. And sure enough, we drove down and scored on the final play of the half. To make it 35-28. But the two intervals that I would point to that were very, very pivotal in this football game. The first one was in the second quarter, but midway through the second quarter, a little bit under 7 minutes to go. It was tied at 14, and West Virginia had a 4th and 5 at the Baylor 35. You know where I'm going with this, right? West Virginia has a 4th and 5 at the Baylor 35, ball on the right hash. Twins to each side. We motioned to empty. So we motioned CJ to the wide side of the field left. Baylor only brought 4, but it was one of those simulated pressures that Dave Aranda is really so creative with. And he caught Wyatt off guard because Wyatt pinched down to take the tackle. The edge guy came. Wyatt couldn't quite step back out to get a glove on him, but fortunately we had a quick throw on. We had basically, it's the air raid version of a kind of a wrinkle on a smash route where you have a post corner by the slot. Cole Taylor was in the slot, and then you had Justin Robinson running the slant underneath of that post corner. And meanwhile, you got CJ flaring to that side. Well, Garrett made a very decisive read, hit J-Rob right in the money, off the flat defender's ear, off the defender that was in man on CJ, right off his ear, and right before he got to these two linebackers who were playing zone coverage, trying to head on a swivel, looking for any kind of crossing routes. That's what Aranda did with his package. He only rushed 4, he showed 6, but those two backers crisscrossed and immediately went to try and rob crossing routes. So we hit that slant just outside of that robber area from that backer, and J-Rob just couldn't come up with it. And again, tie game, you very much got the sense that if we catch that, we're going to go down and score, take a 21-14 lead, and instead dropped football right on the money. Of course, J-Rob was beside himself. I mean, he was really beside himself, maybe even for longer than he should have been. He was upset about it, as you would expect. But instead of us taking that lead, what happens is a handful of plays later, they run the vertical up the seam, 40-yard touchdown to Monterey Baldwin. And we've really kind of from that point forward, we were in a trail position the rest of the game.
Jed,
I mean, weren't we?
Yeah, and not quite the same scenario because we were in the lead when this happened, but maybe same church, different pew. It reminded me so much of the Rodney Gallagher overturn catch against Iowa State.
Yeah,
that Iowa State game, point. You're up 7-0. You're humming. You got all the momentum in the world. Coal rush, crowd's nuts. You scored on a long opening drive. Yes. You get the ball back, another long drive, and it feels like here we go. You get the big third down conversion, but then it gets overturned. Okay, fine. Yes. We'll settle for a field goal. We'll still have a 2-possession lead here early in the first quarter. Great. Michael Hayes uncharacteristically misses that field goal. Oh, no. Don't blink. 3 plays later, you blink, Iowa State, big touchdown pass, and the game was never the same. Same, not the same exact scenario because you were tied this time. You were up 7 before, but I think you get what I'm saying. Same church, different
pew.
And
you know what's funny, Wes, is the way the crow flies. It was about 15 yards away from the exact spot on the field that happened with Rodney against Iowa State. That's a great point on your part. It had that same kind of vibe. Like a missed opportunity. Oh no!
And the crowd too. It felt like a popped balloon in the crowd. Yes. Like just so much of that feel good just zapped. Yeah.
Now the other one that I would point to, you felt a little differently going into halftime because of what we did manage to do on the final play. I mean, had they got to stop, and Baylor will try and tell you they did. Had they got to stop, boy, now you go in 35-21. You have a failed opportunity. Oh, that's not good at all. But it's 35-28. You're humming. You just scored again in 40 some odd seconds. We go in at half and we feel like, okay, we made some adjustments on both sides of the football. We're going to come back out. We're going to play a good half of football. Well, the next thing you know, I mean, all I could think again at that juncture, we had 51 snaps to Baylor's 30. So again, here's the, analytics geek, the old quarterback in me. These are the types of things that I have a mental tracker on that I just look at and I'm thinking, okay, so what that means is it's 35-28, 51 snaps to 30. They get the ball first. If we can sell our soul and get a relatively quick stop, then get the ball back and put together yet another extensive drive like we've already done multiple times in the first half to tie the game, we will be up by a snap count of 60 to 62 to 35 or so in a tie game halfway through the third quarter. And they don't know it yet, but they probably already lost this game because now that defensive snap count is about to already hit the point. Their technique's going to completely erode. 3-yard gains become 5-yard gains. 5-yard gains become 8-yard gains. And our offense could rescue our defense by completely dictating the terms of the game. Yeah. The defense did its part. It got the stop. So the next thing you know, we're getting the ball back much more quickly than we thought, and it's still 35-28 after Baylor got it to start the second half. Now, if you remember what happened, our first play action crossing route to Cole Taylor. We pick up 30 yards down to the 33. That might have been the most electrified the crowd was all night, was after Cole made that play to pick up those 30 yards. Great play by Cole Taylor. So, 1st and 10 at the Baylor 33, down 7, crowd's completely ignited. 4-yard jet sweep to Gallagher, 2nd and 6 to 29. And here we go. This is the critical juncture, the next couple plays, what unfolded. We take a shot play. We max protect. We have a 3-man route. We're trying to take a shot play and score to tie the game. So we put a 3-man route out. We have a 7-man pass protection. Baylor comes with a 5-man simulated pressure, so they bring 5 after Garrett. What happens is the coverage holds up on the 3-man deep route configuration. Garrett tries to escape but runs into traffic, and they get a sack against max protection. So now all of a sudden it's 3rd and 10. All right, fair enough. You're probably still maybe thinking 4 downs.
4 down, yeah.
Depending on what you pick up here on 3rd down.
Get 7 yards here or something.
False start on Tomas. They back it up. I think it was on Tomas. You back it up. Now it's 3rd and 15. Incomplete pass. Now you're facing a 4th and 15 at the 38. So you're literally, by definition, on that fringe area where you got no choice. You got to punt. And once again, we couldn't close the gap and seal the deal on that trail position. We couldn't get out of that trail position. I mean, we did this for 3-4 consecutive possessions. The defense, after getting gashed in the first half, came out and played really solid and solid football in the third quarter, kept giving us the stops that we needed. But one way or the other, the offense then in turn couldn't finish the deal to tie the game and stop the trail position that we were playing from for the balance of almost the entire game. Next thing you know, finally, Baylor leans on us in the fourth quarter. We miss a gap. They hit another big touchdown. And so that's kind of what unfolded. But those are the two critical junctures that I look to. But there's other things to discuss, but those two moments kind of stood out to me.
Jed, I think that's perfectly stated. And man, in every single loss this year, it feels like you have just one or two of those moments that you can point to that, man, if we could have turned the tide here, this could have been differently, right? The Penn State game, you could talk about that. Yeah, it was offensive pass interference at the end of the first half, but that was a huge, huge moment. We mentioned the Iowa State game. Kansas State, maybe it's that end of the first half, failed opportunity in the red zone against K-State. I mean, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating because I hate it. Listen, this is a football guy thing, okay? I hate it when people say, we're a few plays away from being a 9 or 10 win team, or you hear it in the NFL, we're 6-4, but man, 2 plays and we'd be 8-2. That's football, brother. Like Al Pacino, any given Sunday, it's a game of inches, and eventually those inches are going to add up. And it's just, oh man, though, it makes it so frustrating because as you and I have talked about many times, this isn't a good football team, but it's not a bad football team either. It's an average football team. We are 5-5. We are 500. We are an average football team.
What your record says you are.
You are what your record says. You are what your record says you are. But man, a lot of these final scores, even in games that we're losing by 2-3 touchdowns, it's like, yeah, man, but if you would have done, if you wouldn't have had this procedure penalty, if you would have just held on to this catch, if like so many opportunities, if you would have knocked down an Eli Holstein moon ball in the end zone on 2nd and 30 or whatever it was, like all these different moments. And man, it makes you want to pull your hair out because
that holding call doesn't bring that pass down to the 1 against Pitt back.
Correct. You know, this is not a 2 or 3 win football team. But man, it feels like the plays, the opportunities have been there for them to be better than a 5-win football team as well. That's the frustrating part. And those two moments that you highlighted are perfect examples.
This is one of those situations, Wes, where, you know, we could have won a couple more than we have. We could have lost 1 or 2 more than we have.
Sure.
And
that's the other thing too. You're right. Like that game of inches things work. Like you could have very easily lost to Kansas. You know what I mean?
Or even Arizona. Even if Arizona goes south a little bit more than it did. Yeah. So that works both ways. But we're sitting here at 5-5. We're an average football team. We're not a good football team. We're not a bad football team. Unfortunately, we're an average football team. And what average football teams don't do often is beat good football teams. Now, I'm not even talking about Baylor. I'm talking about the other losses that we suffered earlier. But this kind of felt, coming into this game, the way Baylor was playing, especially on the offensive side of the football, to have a chance to win this game, to have a chance to at least stymie or slow down this offense, because Baylor was cooking with gas offensively. These numbers they put up in the 3 games coming in, among the best in the country. They were hotter than Texas chili. So you felt we had to reduce them to being a one-dimensional offense. And you thought, well, okay, maybe we played pretty, stout against the run. We swell up against the run for the most part. That could be the difference. It's one thing for them to make throws or, plays in the pass game on us, as long as they're not able to do both. But the issue was they were able to do both. Yeah. We weren't able to knock them off schedule because they won at the point of attack, because they won the line of scrimmage. Wes, we only had 2 TFLs, 2 tackles for loss all night. That's the fewest we've had in a game since Penn State. So I did not see that coming out of this Baylor offensive line, which is serviceable and a lot better than it was last year. We talked about that, but it's not the Penn State offensive line. I didn't see that coming against our defensive line. And so as a result of that, this balance put Sawyer Robinson in position to put up the types of numbers that he did. Jake came in with a game plan. He's like, okay, we're going to get them on their heels throwing, then we're going to spring the run game. Yeah. And it was a very sound game plan. I mean, they really ambushed us with a couple shots they took. They worked the quick game, a lot of RPOs, quick screens, outnumbered us 3-on-2 to the perimeter, got the ball in the hands of their skill guys with some high percentage quick throws. Next thing you know, you look up and he's 12 for 12 to start the game or some crazy number. It was a while before he had an incompletion. So by the time he starts forcing the football downfield, they're already humming offensively again because they were able to both run it and throw it. And that made things supremely difficult. We needed to force them to be one-dimensional, and they were anything but. They were an incredibly balanced offensive football team. They had over 500 yards because they threw for 330 and ran for 180. The only chance we had was if that 180 number was more like half that. I mean, if it was half that, it would have been the type of game where
or even
now
if
you
it
can
was
get a little
even
more
if it was
creative with your
one
coverages.
even if it was 130, 120. I mean,
yeah, something where you can get a little more creative with your coverages.
You take away that
Bryson Washington.
That Bryson Washington 51-yard touchdown run is maybe a 15-yard gain instead of a 51-yard touchdown.
Yeah, because
run,
what was happening was we had to start rolling the dice a little bit. It reminded me of last year against Ollie Gordon in the fourth quarter. Remember those big runs he popped? Well,
yep, totally.
We were rolling the dice.
Totally.
We're going cover zero, and we're blitzing. If you miss one fit, it's Katie bar the door. And that's exactly what happened with Bryson Washington. Because again, we didn't blitz a lot. We're not built to do that. We blitzed maybe a tick more. I'm trying to remember what the number said. A tick more than we did against Cincinnati. But once again, we're all about making you think we blitzed a lot more than we actually did. And it just, the fundamental difference was they consistently, throughout the balance of 4 quarters, kind of did what they wanted on the ground and kept staying ahead of schedule. We couldn't get them into enough third and longs, and that's why they dominated in transition downs. We couldn't get them into enough third and longs to try and get exotic like we did early in the Cincinnati game to confuse Sorsby. I mean, when Sorsby was 1 for 9 on third downs with those conversions, that was because we had him confused. We couldn't do that to Sawyer Robinson because they stayed ahead of schedule. So all the things we needed to do, we didn't do quite enough. And because of a couple times Baylor blinked, we had our opportunities. We made some of those opportunities, but we didn't make the most of all those opportunities. And that's why they separated late in the game. And frustrating, absolutely. Once again, we were back to some of the issues situationally. When you break this thing down into the modern game of football, the days of holding teams to 285 yards and 13 points on a weekly basis, nobody's going to do that anymore. Georgia doesn't do that. Nobody's going to do that. So what you have to do, good defenses that help you win in 3 situations in 3 categories. You know them as well as I do by now because we've talked about it for 3 years on this podcast. Red zone touchdown production. Okay, they were 3 for 3. Red zone touchdown production, Baylor had 3 trips to the red zone. They punched in the end zone all 3 times. You can't do that. We entered the game dead last in the Big 12 in red zone touchdown rate. That didn't help. Third downs. They moved the sticks almost at will on third downs and in transition downs. That's the other key situation. You have to get them off the field. We failed to do that, again, in part because we didn't win on early downs. They stayed ahead of schedule, and they won on third down. And then finally, turnovers. You got to steal possessions. We didn't do that. What we did do against Cincinnati, we're back to the drought. We were in the turnover well against Cincinnati. Well, we're out of that well now, and that bucket's empty, and we're back to the drought. I mean, it's tough the way we're built as a football team.
Yep.
If you're not able to confuse the quarterback, if you're not able to get ahead of schedule and force a couple of those turnovers, we're taking the long way to try and win. And I just don't know. We might have too many limitations to be able to pull that off. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. That's why we're 5-5. That's why every time we talk about these tight games against these good teams, Baylor's a good football team. They're going to be a handful for people down the stretch the next couple games. They're a good football team. We've lost games to other good football teams. The reason we were in some of those games but didn't finish are those shortcomings that we just talked about. One of those 3 areas, you fell short, either on offense or on defense in those situations. You either lost and didn't make the most of situations in the red zone, offensively not scoring enough, and we're pretty good at that, but there's been times we didn't. Defensively not stopping them enough, we're on third down. Look what we did offensively in transition downs or into possession downs the other night. That's not winning football. And we struggled on fourth down, Wes. We were 2 for 5, and those 2, I think, came late against the worst fourth down defense in the Big 12. Yeah. Those are the types of things that cost you in close games. We blinked 3 or 4 times. They blinked 2 or 3 times. That was the difference for them to be able to separate and put this game away in the fourth quarter.
Well, somebody who never blinks is our guy, Rick Lewis, and our friends at Fortis, where roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. You got to visit fortis.us.com. Jed, I think that about covers it. One thing we have to mention, of course, is T-Ray as well, too. devastating, scary injury, but he had it's Monday as Jed and I record this. This will drop Tuesday. Traylon Ray had surgery today, and or actually, was it Sunday?
He posted a tweet. You saw that, right?
Yeah, it was the tweet. So the tweet was yes. So sorry. So pardon me. This was last night. This was Sunday night. So he had his surgery Sunday. T-Ray took to Twitter last night and just said, I appreciate all the messages I've been receiving from everyone. The surgery went great, and I will make a full recovery. Sometimes you might not fully understand God's plan, but you have to trust it. Much love, the Mountaineer Nation. I'll be back better than ever. Go Ears. So scary moment, and we wish all the best for him, but good to see that surgery went well. He's in good spirits and ready to attack this thing. That's always the important first step.
That had an impact on the sidelines. He's a popular guy. He's a leader. Yeah, the kids were hit hard by that emotionally. The one positive that I saw with that happening when it did happen, it happened when he had family in town at the game. And so if that's the type of thing that you have to go through and endure, I mean, just imagine his family being back home in Florida, or that makes it even tougher. So at least he had family in town at the game to help him through all that. But yeah, we wish him nothing but the absolute best. Incredible kid. He's been a really productive player for us. He made some plays for us the other night. We could have used him in the second half, and we're going to miss him down the stretch as well. Jaden Bray's kind of still on the shelf. We'll talk about that more later in the week. But yeah, you hate to see that happen to a kid like T-Ray. You hate to see it happen to anybody, but he's a really good kid. That was unfortunate. I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, it's one of those things that it wasn't as catastrophic or serious because of the nature of what happened last year at TCU. If you remember what happened with Aubrey last year at TCU.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've had too many of these scary moments in the last. I mean, CJ the year before that down in Texas.
Yes, I mean, Texas. And when I think of those, CJ at DKR or Aubrey at A&G,
Trey Lathan last year at
really worried about the
A&G
safety
too.
of the kid. And I mean, I'm looking at his teammates, and they're just beside themselves emotionally. This was difficult only because you knew it was lower body. You knew he was going to be all right. You're just like, man, this is devastating for him, and it hurts everybody to see him go through that. But yeah, tough one, but I'm glad it went well for him. We're glad to be getting good news from him about that. But wish him nothing but the best in his recovery, and I'm sure he'll attack that 100 miles an hour.
Thank you to our friends at Johnston Equipment for being a presenting sponsor of In the Gun as well, too. Now at Johnston Equipment, get 0% financing for 72 months, plus a free loader on select Coyote models in stock. You got to visit Johnston Equipment at their location on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. One last piece of good news, Jed, before we get out of here as well, too. The ITG family, it grows, baby. Probably 5 or 6 different people that swung past the Peach lot, saw the Grateful Dead WVU and the In the Gun flags flying. Logan was one of the guys who stopped by. Logan does a WVU podcast with his dad. He was saying, we're just getting the thing going, and we've been enjoying listening to you guys and big fans. And he said, I keep hearing about the flags. I saw the flags. I had to say hello. So like I said, probably 3 or 4 different groups of 1 or 2 people that stopped and said hello and hung out for a couple minutes. So thank you. That means a lot. It really does.
Absolutely.
And hey, 3:30 kickoff for one last home game against UCF. The mood isn't great. The weather doesn't look great, but we will still be there in the Peach lot, baby, with refreshments and some food and some beverage. So one last time. I'll talk more about this on the UCF preview, obviously, but one last time, if you want to swing by and say hello, look for the flags. The bat signal will be up, and we'll be in the Peach lot one more time in 2024.
This is always the tough one. The students are out of town. You have various hunting seasons approaching. It's
people
always
getting ready for Thanksgiving travel. Yeah,
getting ready for Thanksgiving. Yeah. The one thing that I think the Big 12, the one solid that maybe they have done for us, I don't like to travel the weekend after Thanksgiving, and we seem to do it every year, but it makes sense. If you're an Eastern team in a Southwestern conference, at least they give us one of our road games at the end So we have nothing to recover for. So once again, we're going to end the season in Lubbock, but this is the last shot at home going into Thanksgiving week. So it's always a kind of a mercurial to toss that out there crowd. It's a challenge because of that. Usually you have some weather issues. Usually you have the students out of town. There's all these things working against it. But once again, shout out to Mountaineer fans. There was a point early in that game where 52,000 fans were there, and they were noisy and they were rowdy. There was a point early in that game, if you remember this, Wes, it was obvious Baylor watched the Cincinnati tape, right? This just in. A shocker, right? That Dave Aranda would do that.
Yeah.
But they had a situation that was 4th and 1 early in the game on their own 40. Now, yes, Dave Aranda loves to go for it on 4th down. Neil Brown and Dave Aranda do so more than anybody in the Big 12. But they weren't going to do that. It was 4th and 1. It was very obvious. They lined up in Wildcat, and it was a pretense. They were just going to go hard count. They were going to run a freeze play. They were trying to draw us off, just like Cincinnati did. But instead, remember what happened? Our crowd impacted the play, and their tackle jumped off. He didn't even have a blocking assignment. Think about that. He jumped off sides, and he didn't have a play to run because our crowd got so loud. So hats off, literally, to Mountaineer fans. That is 100% a penalty. That's 5 yards you gave West Virginia right there. You absolutely handed the Mountaineers 5 yards right there.
Well, if you can hear it in my voice a little bit. I'm still a little raspy here about 48 hours later. So listen, I never want to be accused of not doing my part. I know everybody will have their different reasons, schedules, holidays, hunting, just disinterest at this point in the year for not showing up Saturday, but I'll be there. Garrett Green, Wyatt Milam, a lot of those guys one last time running out onto Mountaineer Field. And listen, I just love Morgantown on a game day, whether there's 60,000 people there or 6,000 people there. It's something special that we only get to do a few times a year. So I will be there one last time. But again, we'll get into more of that as we give you the UCF preview later this week. Of course, Phil Steele later this week as well too. So plenty more to come here on ITG as we roll down the home stretch of the college football regular season. That'll do it for this edition of In the Gun, though. For Skylar Callahan and the beer truck Big O, he is the signal caller Jed Drenning. I'm Wes Euler. The one thing we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. You've been In the Gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.